Last week, we talked about the passing of the Finnish composer Leif Segerstam, remember?
Right.
And I've been thinking about his 379 symphonies, something like that, around there. 379 symphonies at the moment. We might discover there are more. It had me thinking if we could pit those 379 symphonies against AI, have AI compose 379 symphonies and they go head to head to see whose symphonies are better. I think Leif Segerstam might have been a symphony writing version of John Henry, the guy from the folktale Born with a Hammer in His Hand, and he went against the steam engine and beat the steam engine. I think Leif Segerstam could beat AI with his symphonies.
I haven't heard anything that I want to listen to composed by AI. Other than
there is that.
A few parody songs that made me laugh.
Some of the parody songs are pretty funny on YouTube. We recommend them. They are, in fact, adult music in the way that our pink neon logo suggests.
Right.
So you might want to check those out.
Well, you're listening to Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind, bringing you the latest releases in classical and jazz music that we're sure you want to hear. This is episode 186, and I'm your co-host, Russ.
And I'm your co-host, Mike.
The good news is that we don't have to play the theme this week.
Oh, good, yeah, because nobody died. But ironically, in a way, this is our Halloween episode because we have a sort of theme of masks and disguises and that sort of thing going. So this is going to be really interesting.
And a little international flavor on a related theme, too. But more on that later. Got a few things to announce. Interestingly, so far this month, Brazil is number 2 in downloads for the first time.
All right, way to go, Brazil. I want to move there after Greece. Yeah. We're going to have another mountain lair in Brazil.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
So hello, and thanks for listening to all our new Brazilian audience members. That was a pleasant surprise.
Bossa Nova me, Brazil.
Another big thanks to drummer and composer Olivier Robin for sharing our episode from last week on his Facebook page with all of his fans. Be sure to check out his recording, Take It Like It Is. That's on the Fresh Sound New Talent label, a really exciting album with lots of fresh sounding tunes.
All right.
And next week, we're looking forward to a special episode. We're going to have our friend, guitarist and composer Jason Kaiser on.
On again, we should say. He's been on before. So looking forward to that.
Right.
Yeah.
To talk us through his new release, Kind of Kenny. That's on OA2 Records, Origin Arts 2. It comes out next Friday, October 25th. And we also hope to be joined by guitarist John Stowell, Jason's jazz guitar mentor, who also plays on the album and who played with trumpeter Kenny Wheeler, whose compositions are featured on Jason's album in very unique instrumentation.
Yeah, it's great to have Jason on because not only is he a great musician, but he's also an insightful listener as well. So he has a lot of great comments to make on these recordings, which he also listens to. So he's really the ideal guest.
We're going to have him exposed to a couple other recordings to talk about as well.
Yeah.
More on that at the end of this episode. Just a note to regular listeners. Normally, I do all the post-production and get the episodes out on Monday. Next week, I have another commitment, so it may take me a little bit longer, a day or two more to get that episode out.
Okay.
So just be patient next time, but I'll work on it as fast as I can.
With Jason, we're doing only 3 recordings, but it'll still be a 3-hour episode. And
Probably it will be.
Because we talk a lot with him. Yeah.
I've been listening to Kind of Kenny. Yeah. He sent us advanced copies of it.
Which he signed too, which is great, yeah.
And there's going to be a lot to talk about. So we'll be diving deep into those tunes and what's going on that album. So you don't want to miss next week's episode.
Yeah, he left us each a personal message because he gave us 2 CDs, one for you and one for me, which I thought was really nice and classy.
That's great. He's a super nice guy.
Yeah.
So be sure to check back for that upcoming episode. But tonight, we've got a lot of interesting stuff to get to in this episode. And in the episode description, you'll find links to Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music for all of the music that we'll discuss. Also, as always, at the top of the description, there's a link to the full episode playlist. All of the music in one place on Deezer, CD quality streaming music from France. You can listen to the podcast episode on Deezer as well if you want to get everything in one place. And if you can't see the full description or the recording list and links are not easy to follow on whatever app or platform you listen to us on, you can always come over to our host site, Podbean, podbean.com, where everything is neat and easy to follow. If you enjoy the podcast, please follow or subscribe wherever you listen to us. Tell a music-loving friend, and just take a moment, give us a ranking or write a short review, because that helps us get listed in the music category recommendations, and that helps us reach a wider audience. Come over and follow us on Facebook as well. We've got a page there. You can get extra info throughout the week with new releases and little musical tidbits. See our interaction with the musicians and artists. You can leave a message or comment there as well. And if you'd like to contact us directly with any comments or questions by email, our address is adultmusicpodcast, all one word, @gmail.com. We'll be playing musical samples tonight from these 6 albums, and here is our fair use disclaimer. Musical sample clips are for commentary and educational purposes. We recommend that listeners listen to the complete recordings, all of which are available on streaming services in the links provided. And we also suggest that if you enjoy the music, you consider purchasing the CDs or high-quality downloads to support the artists. All right, where's this Masquerade game going to begin tonight?
Yeah, we certainly do have a Masquerade starting here. We have an album called #Let's Baroque. And this is by our favorite breakdancing countertenor, Jakub Józef Orliński. Remember, he's a countertenor, and he's also a breakdancer, apparently.
Right.
He's apparently really good at it, unlike certain other breakdancers that we saw at the Olympics, who shall remain nameless.
Don't remind me.
Okay. Anyway, he's the vocalist, and he's doing this record with Aleksander Dębicz on the piano, and apparently they knew each other in college. This also features 2 rock musicians, Wojciech Guminski on bass and Marcin Ulanowski on drums, and I'm hoping I'm getting close to pronouncing these names correctly. This is on the Erato label. 27 September was the release date. I like the title. #Let's Baroque, let's rock, and then you have Baroque, like not Barack Obama. This is like Baroque music.
Baroque, yeah.
Is what it means, okay? And it also has this kind of flashy, appealing cover art featuring Orliński and Dębicz on it. So check that out. Maybe just download this or just do a search for this record. The notes on this record say that, in a sense, what we have here are cover versions of Baroque pieces. It's a pretty interesting description, because I guess you could say that's sort of what we hear. The recordings anchor these Baroque songs in the musical styles of the 21st century. Now, I hate to use that horrible word crossover, but it's used in the booklet note. What crossover is it's defined as a blend of genres, styles, and eras that invites music lovers to discover new musical worlds. Crossover to me usually means that you just you take these 2 sort of really strong forms of music and dilute them so that they're not interesting anymore. But that's not really the case here. So I don't like using the word crossover for this album. I don't really think it's a crossover album. The note also says that the album was recorded because Orliński and Dębicz love to have fun. They know each other from university. And during the pandemic, the pair played classical music faithfully to its texts, but also improvised and composed, as you will when you're in a practice room.
Mm-hmm.
Why not? Those playful studio sessions and duet concerts, which left plenty of room for improvisation, led to the bolder idea that we hear on this album. The booklet has the song texts, but no translations. Now, it's not much of a problem. A good deal of the songs are in English, but the last song is in Polish. Google Translate came to the rescue, of course. I mean, we have modern technology now, but I'd rather not have to resort to having a smartphone handy to hold over the foreign language texts. I'm going to ask Erato Records, please print the translations, or at least put them on your website or something,
right.
Okay? It would just be helpful. A lot of these songs are in Italian. You could do searches for these on the internet if you wanted to, but even so, they're famous songs. Put the translations in there. All right, track 1 is by the pianist Aleksander Dębicz, called simply Intro. And this introduces the world of the performers here. It also refers to the daily practice of musicians, warm-up, and singing exercises. And this is from the booklet notes. It starts with an electronic sound, sounding really contemporary, popular music style. There's a very upfront, pop-produced piano line with thick electronic bass behind it, and Orliński's reverb-soaked voice beneath. You got to think of those updated Gregorian chant albums, the ones where they put the beat under. They were big in the 2000s. People used to relax to them. You know what I find more relaxing than that? Actual Gregorian chants with just the monks, because they do those wonderful floating modal melodies. This whole thing would pass on a progressive rock album. The piano line kind of reminds me of figures of Focus's song Hocus Pocus. Remember that one with the yodel in it?
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. It sort of reminded me a little of that. Not because of the yodeling, but because of just some of the chords and the lines in the piano. Orliński doesn't yodel, but he does melisma-ize in his vocal singing. The production is rock music style. Okay, I've talked about this. You want to hear it. Let's pick this up from about a minute and 30 seconds in.
Is this the right podcast?
Yeah, I'm sure some listeners are probably put off already, but I found this kind of interesting. Stick with it. We've got some sort of Baroque compositions disguised as contemporary pop songs coming up. Think of it as a costume party.
Right.
It is Halloween after all. Okay, track 2, Francesco Nicola Fago, Alla Gente, which is after Alla Gente a Dio diletta from Il Faraone Sommerso, which strangely means the submerged pharaoh. I kind of wonder what that opera's about. Anyway, Dębicz wanted to add more emotions of hope through Disney-like chords on this track. The piano opening is relatively natural, but recorded like a pop music piano. There's a heartbeat bass drum and electric bass, and we hear Orliński sing this gorgeous melody with considerable studio reverb on his voice. Let me sample it there. Yeah. Okay. So that'll give you an idea of the approach that's used on this album. Although there are some pretty creative ideas as we go on. Okay. You might notice this is not for purists, but it works well. We hear Orliński's vocal tone, but the voice has pop music production on it, but not the type that alters the tone. It just makes it sound a bit disembodied. I should say it doesn't alter the tone here. There are places on the album where it will. There's some electronic keyboard effects on this. The overall sound production kind of makes this sound like a Phil Collins ballad. I could see this making some waves on popular music streaming if someone catches on to it.
Against all odds.
Yeah, it could be. Next, Henry Purcell, Strike the Viol. After his song Strike the Viol, Touch the Lute from Come Ye Sons of Art, Z323 from the Ode for Queen Mary's Birthday. The piano starts this with an ostinato line that I'm pretty sure isn't in the original, at least not sounding like this. It sounds mechanical in its approach. The vocal has absolutely no production effects on it here. In fact, it sounds like there's a single microphone recording both musicians, sort of in a DIY way. The production does change, though, when the bass and drums come in. Piano is up front, and the vocal gets some studio enhancement. Despite the production, Orliński manages to make us pick up the charms of Purcell's vocal writing, especially his use of repeated words, in this case on the word sing, and I'm going to isolate that. I really love it when Purcell does this in his compositions. Yeah, I wonder what would happen if someone put that on in a dance club, how people would react. I don't know if this works as well as a pop song as the previous track's arrangement did, but it had a pretty cool ending too. Track 4, Henry Purcell again, Fairest Isle from King Arthur. This is a pretty famous song. It's got a ballad-type piano starting the track with wisps of electronic tones heard supporting. This comes across as a theater ballad. It's a pretty melody, very catchy. I do kind of wish a modern lyricist would throw in expressions like, Venus here will choose her dwelling and forsake her Cyprian grove, which is one of the lines we hear on this track. It would make listeners scratch their heads in an amusing way. There were bands in the 60s that used to include lyrics like this. I like the production on this one. It enhances the vocal line. Let's listen to a little bit of this. Getting into a little Barry Manilow feel there, I think.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. This ends atmospherically with an enhanced cello line, by the way. Track 5, one of my favorite composers from the Baroque era, Claudio Monteverdi, Oblivion from Oblivion Soave from L'Incarnazione di Poppea, which is an opera by Monteverdi, SV 308. This has the qualities of a trance-like, dreamlike club track, according to the booklet notes. Radical changes were made to the harmonic layer of the piece. There's a heavy thudding beat to this, with a repeating piano line that makes the track hypnotic. The Oblivion theme is well mirrored in the production, making that Oblivion sound restful and inviting. What winds up happening with hearing the track produced this way is we get the traditional song-like form emphasized. Let's hear this a little bit. That's how the track ends. I rather like that. That last word he was singing over and over is dormite, which means sleep. And, we know this from the Latin root for dormitory, which is a place where you sleep when you're in university. Track 6, Henry Purcell again, Sound the Trumpet from Come Ye Sons of Art, Z323, Ode for Queen Mary's Birthday. This has a dry-sounding staccato piano beginning the track, again with total dry vocals as though this were recorded in a practice room. Then the production comes in with a trumpet-sounding solo, which I think is Orliński vocally imitating the sound of a trumpet. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, if it's him, it's a pretty impressive imitation. Listen for yourself. I'll sample this from about the 30-second mark. Yeah, you rarely hear Baroque works played in a with a jazzy feel. That's really unique.
What's really interesting there is he's more like in the trombone range. When he's a countertenor, you'd expect him to sound like Maynard Ferguson up in the altissimo register, but he's not.
Right. Anyway, next track. Handel, George Friedrich Handel, Pena Tiranna, from Pena Tiranna io sento al cuore. I feel a tyrannical pain in my heart, from Amadigi di Gaula, HWV 11. Here the vocal comes in with a thumping acoustic bass, recorded very close to give it extra presence. This kind of sounds like it would be recorded on a jazz album, but it's not in the jazz style. Let's listen. Maybe it does sound like a bit like a jazz ballad there. The voice again has some reverb on it, giving it a bit of a pop music halo. The track sounds like the result you get when you isolate a jazz band behind a soundproof barrier in the studio. Very clean in production. The piece is sensitively performed with everything on the track up close, and the piece itself moves like a Whitney Houston ballad, really. Then at 4 minutes and 30 seconds, the piece seems to end, and we suddenly hear mysterious, eerie rumblings from a bowed cello and the tremolo on the piano. A four-to-the-floor beat starts on the drums, sort of like the disco beat from the 70s, thudding with a diffuse sound. All sorts of atmospherics come out, including Orliński singing vocalese on a single vowel. This ending is the result of an improvisation, and it would be cool to hear it launched into in an actual opera. What do you think would happen then? It would certainly startle the audience. Track 8 is another composition from Aleksander Dębicz, his Toccata 1. This is a piano piece inspired by Dębicz's love of J.S. Bach, as well as hip-hop music. Again, two things that you wouldn't think go together, but I actually really love when people try to put really different things together, if they can do it. I think this is hard to do in music, though. Here, Dębicz and Orliński emphasized the hip-hop music inspirations by introducing a strong rhythm section and rap. Rapid exercise-like staccato line in the piano gets a beat and continues. The piano then presents a theme, which it then repeats in the high end. There are English lyrics, which I think are rapped by Orliński, at least that's what the booklet leads us to believe. Actually, it's more like it's spoken over the rhythm than rapped. He's not in his countertenor voice here, if indeed it's him. He's got an interesting quasi-English accent when he does his flow, which is even more interesting because he's not English. This is not his native language. Let's hear a sample of his rap.
But finding the strength to set your own course, being the one who cares, dares to show remorse. That's what I was always looking for. It ain't always looking like that though. I've been walking my way all night, all day, constantly falling, slowing down my pace. Hearing you can do it, that it ain't possible. Hearing you won't do it, that's so irrational. I wouldn't believe, even though I had doubts, to all of my doings, actions and routes. Carrying my failures, feeling their bites, holding my head up, proud of putting up the fight.
Do you think an Eminem collaboration is in the works?
I don't know. He's telling it like it is, though, I guess, in his world there. We also hear Orliński singing vocalises in the background, as you heard. This is an odd track. It's fun, I guess. It's certainly fun improvisatory work. And the text is in the booklet, so you can follow along to the rap. I should say, though, I feel like the rap is buried a bit under the production of the instruments. It could have been boosted a bit in the mix so we could hear it better. Track 9, Henry Purcell, Music for a While. I love this song. This is after Music for a While from the incidental music to Oedipus, Z583. This starts with a dry piano line and is given a beat on the drums, I usually like the spareness of the piece, which I feel serves Purcell's setting of the words. We miss some of Purcell's word-setting magic with the rhythm inserted in the track, driving it along, rather than having the repeated words set the time. On the repeated word drop in the second minute, a few rhythmic pauses accent the word. It's a nice touch. I think I like this tune too much to get into this particular track, though. I really think that in the song, the actual words set the tempo and not really the beat. But anyway, let's hear the beginning and see what you think. Yeah, I feel like the vocal, which I think sets the rhythm, becomes subordinated to the beat that's set by the bass drum. And I feel like this works better in its original style. Track 10, Claudio Monteverdi, Zeffiro Torna, after Zeffiro Torna e di Suavi Accenti. I really love that word, soave, from Scherzi Musicali SV 251. This one is a duet with Madison Nonoa, the soprano. And the track has an intriguing repeated guitar, and I guess it's the bass guitar of Wojciech Guminski. I could swear I've heard this pattern before or something like it. Light percussion and electronic atmospherics are heard in the ground, the repeating bass line. There's a female voice on this duet along with Orliński. It's soprano Madison Nonoa, as I mentioned. The vocal shakes between the two, or like the tremolo, I guess you'd say. They used to call them shakes in the Baroque era, are well performed, but are strange in this atmospheric setting. It kind of feels like some past practice that's being put into something in the present. When they finish, an instrumental section comes in, and I'm going to sample this about a minute in. Yeah, the spacing of the voices is interesting too, because you have Orliński very clearly in the right channel, and Nonoa, the soprano, is kind of in the center, towards the left, but not like squarely in the left channel. I thought that was pretty interesting. The song is totally transformed by this setting. I think it loses some of its magic, though. At about the 4-minute and 20-second mark, when the vocal ends, the band kicks in, and we get a kazoo solo by Guminski, more atmospheric than up front. The main melody is rather catchy, sung over the repeating patterns in the bass guitar. Track 11, Antonio Vivaldi, Vedrò, after Vedrò con mio diletto, from Il Giustino, RV 717. The drama in this song is emphasized with a more cinematic sound. The duo hope to remind listeners of an epic film, according to the booklet notes. Radical changes were made to the harmonic layer of this piece. The track starts with a mellow, atmospheric, repeating piano line, which then goes into warm rising chords. Nothing like what we think of when we think of Vivaldi. Then the vocal line comes in at the 51-second mark, singing with only warm piano chords and bass underneath, the voice allowed to float between the bars. Heavily produced, distantly thundering drum sounds create atmosphere. Track 12, Aleksander Dębicz's composition called Finale. This concludes the whole story, especially with the expanded harmonies of the choir, formed by Jakub Józef Orliński himself. The track starts with rising piano chords, and Orliński comes in with a vocalese singing the ooh sound. Let's hear this. The track comes across as atmospheric, and the ending features a big buildup of sound. Track 13 is a composition by Piotr Banach called something in Polish. Moja I twoja nadzieja, or something like that. It means my and your hope. It's a song by the very popular Polish band Hey. I'm kind of surprised no one in English-speaking countries thought to name their band Hey, H-E-Y. Like, hey, you know. It's Orliński and Dębicz's tribute to the richness of Polish popular music. The Polish lyric is very positive and encouraging. It goes something like, nothing really helps if you don't help love today. Kind of reminds me of a little bit of the Stevie Wonder lyric, you know, love's in need of love today. Or something like that. It's one of the key lines according to the Google Translate that I ran over this text. The track itself is atmospheric too, with heavy effects on the vocal, reverbed and echoing in the background. The vocal proper comes in at the 1 minute mark, and it's actually nice to hear Orliński sing in Polish, his native language, in this style. The song itself has repeating patterns in the vocal that serve as hooks, and they're very effective. Let's hear just a little bit of that. This is rather very different than everything we've heard on the album. Yeah, it's amazing how an effective hook can just stay in your head. That one really works very well. Anyway, that's the last track on the album, and I'll confess, I rather enjoyed hearing these pieces, produced in the studio like they were pop music tracks. For the most part, this works well. I've got to say, I thought Dębicz's Toccata 1 with its rap rather took away from any magic that the album created, but otherwise, the pop sound production and overall atmospheric feeling of the album were appealing. The album has a playful quality, and the timeless melodies of the Baroque tunes programmed come across well in modern pop music guise, which I guess shouldn't be so surprising, though I thought they lost the sensitive quality that we hear in the concert hall. The ear here is rather drawn to the quality of the melodies themselves, not to the sensitivity of tone we generally get from Baroque performances. Dębicz's intro and finale were both atmospheric, but I thought his Toccata 1 was a bit too generic with its rap by Orliński. Man, I'm really beating up on that track. The album is entertaining. It feels good. I can see listeners de-stressing to its gentle tones in the same way they did to those electronically enhanced Gregorian chant albums with a beat added that made such a splash in the 2000s. Overall, though, the album is not for me, though I'm glad I heard it. I enjoyed the creativity of these new takes on rather familiar repertoire from long ago, but I feel like the production hides too much of what I love about this music. Do hear it, though. It might give you greater appreciation for the compositions themselves. And if you're going to this because the sound appealed to you, and this is the first time you're hearing these songs, you have to go and listen to them in their original classical Baroque style as well. It's just very important to know them the way they were first presented to the world, or close to it anyway.
It's certainly a novel setting for Orliński's usually angelic voice. If you come at it the way that they apparently made this as just something fun, it's kind of interesting. Sometimes it's like prog rock, sometimes it's a bit new agey,
yeah,
and sometimes Europop-ish, but it does surprise with unexpected developments in spots, like the bass and voice harmonies towards the end of Fairest Isle. I was kind of surprised at some of the tension developed there. The hip-hop toccata was another unexpected spot when that came along. But Sound the Trumpet with the vocalization over walking bass was probably my favorite moment.
That was pretty cool.
Just to hear him jamming away with some brass-type sounds. Yeah, interesting. A little diversion, and it sounds like they had a lot of fun. And it makes you think about these famous classical melodies in a new way. So, all in good fun.
Yeah, I think that's always a good thing to do, just hear things in a different way. Our second album, Unplayed Stories in 40 Fingers. This is by the Multipiano Ensemble, Rundfunk-Sinfonieorchester Berlin, conducted by Ivor Bolton. On the Hyperion label, this is released on October 4th. I have to say, I think the title is a bit misleading. It says 40 fingers, and we rarely hear that on the album.
Not all the time.
Yeah, we only hear it really at the end. Anyway, the Multipiano project was launched in 2011 under the umbrella of the Buchmann Mehta School of Music, a joint institution of Tel Aviv University and Israel Philharmonic Orchestra. The ensemble features young pianists and their mentor, Tomer Lev. Interesting cover art on this album, picturing books with arms poking pencils at each other. It's a painting called A Literary Joust and was created by Jonathan Wolstenholme in 2006. It's a recent painting. It seems a bit old school for that year, though. The internet was already with us then. This is an area of classical music that I don't know much about, the multi-hand piano concerto or works for...
Yeah, we've only heard a few of them on the podcast.
Yeah, and none like this with orchestra into the mix as well.
Right.
Not only that, this isn't just like multi-handed music, it's intergenerational musical collaborations that transcend time, culture, and geography. So it's sort of like a classical version of, say, Natalie Cole singing with Nat King Cole, on a recording he made long ago, but she's kind of somehow gotten her voice on there through some computer magic, that sort of thing. We hear more and more of these days. That's not exactly what's happening here. These people actually did, in many cases, work with each other. All of the works are from the early 19th century. The album showcases artistic partnerships between teachers and their students, between idols and their admirers, as well as contemporary musicians reimagining forgotten classical masterpieces. Okay, now, the one that really fits that description of intergenerational musical collaborations is the first work. This is tracks 1 through 3. Felix Mendelssohn and Ignaz Moscheles, Fantasy and Variations on a Theme by Weber. MWV 09. This is the original 1833 version for 2 pianos and orchestra, and the 2 pianists are Alon Kari and Tomer Lev, who's the director of this ensemble, not the conductor. The origin of this work lies in a charity event held in 1833 by the British Royal Court. Moscheles had been Mendelssohn's teacher. It's based on a work called Marche Bohemienne from the incidental music to Preziosa by Carl Maria von Weber, which was a popular hit in London during the 1830s. Like today's superstars, Moscheles and Mendelssohn were both very busy and met only a few days before the charity event and pretty much jammed until they had a plan for the work. After the second performance, the score mysteriously disappeared, and 16 years later, Moscheles decided to create his own new and different version of the work. But the editor incorrectly presented it as the original work of the 2 composers, and the misattribution persisted for decades. The original jointly written score re-emerged in St. Petersburg at the beginning of the 21st century, and it's that original score that we hear on this recording, so this is sort of a first. Track 1 is the Fantasy, and this was written by Mendelssohn, and you can kind of tell, really, it's really in his style. It's pretty brief at 2 minutes and 33 seconds. It has a standard Mendelssohn rumbling opening, then some quieter responses to that rumble in the orchestra. There are a lot of Mendelssohn fingerprints in this, including the 2-note fanfare on brass. The piano's entry at about the 1 minute and 54 second mark is improvisatory and slow, Later, we get the two-piano texture, and I'm going to sample a little bit of that. It sounds like one piano gets the melody and the other one's doing all the passage work. Having two pianos, of course, slightly thickens the piano texture, but the two play so well dynamically together that you almost don't notice. Track 2 is the theme and variations. Masquerades arranged Weber's theme at the beginning. It's followed by two variations by Mendelssohn and then two by Masquerades. The opening theme is march-like and sounds fun. The piano line is playful. We can hear the Mendelssohn orchestral fingerprints in the first variation, particularly in the orchestral writing. It becomes fleet-fingered, featuring harmonized scale figures, impressively taken by these two pianists. The second variation also has some impressive speed from the two pianists, and the first of Masquerades' two variations starts at the 5-minute mark. Let me sample that. The second variation follows and slows down toward the end for the entry to the third movement. Track 3, the finale, bears Mendelssohn's stamp for the most part. It's got a gypsy-inspired coda. This comes across almost as another variation. It's similar to the melody we heard in the second movement. Again, ensemble playing by the two pianists is superb. They blend well and remain in sync despite the quick-fingered material. There's a bit of a slow cadenza starting around the 3-minute and 12-second mark. At 3 minutes and 40 seconds, the gypsy-inspired cadenza starts. Let's hear that. And that's the end of the work. Tracks 4 through 7, Ignaz Masquerades, Le Contraste, Grand Duo, Opus 115, version for two pianos in 8 hands, and orchestra by Tomer Lev and Arye Levinon. 8 hands is 40 fingers, so I guess we do hear 40 fingers on this track. The pianists are Tomer Lev, Berenika Glicksman, Alon Carly, and Nimrod Mary Hafel. This is originally composed for two pianos in 8 hands without orchestra. The work is modeled after Baroque traditions from both French and German styles. The original version is unusually dense and thick in texture, so the two pianists here reimagined the work in a version with orchestra. This version aimed to enhance the monumental aspects of the composition while dispersing the dense textures between soloists and orchestra, thereby creating a broader range of colors and registers that would be more accessible and engaging for listeners. And that information is from the booklet. So thank you for that, Hyperion Records. Track 4, Prelude Andante con molto ma ben accentuato. This is elaborate. It combines the various rhythms of a French overture and dwells on the worlds of Rameau and Couperin. It's blended with more contemporary elements of the salon style of the time. This has the shorter note values of a Baroque work, but the pianos fill out the sound a lot. The touch of the various pianists is commendably light, and the sound comes across in balance with the orchestra. Let's hear a little bit of this. The 8 hands seem to be used sparingly and with subtlety in this movement. It's attractive, and a horn signal ends the movement and introduces the fugue, which is track 5. This is a monumental fugue following the epic examples of Bach and Handel. Let's hear the opening. What is the sound of 40 fingers playing? Something like that, I guess. I enjoyed the entry of all the fugal voices here. The movement has an attractive flow to it. The fugue builds up a bit in dramatic power by the middle of the movement, but the entire flow of the fugue and the movement remains pleasant. There's a lot of intricacy to the piano writing, and the performers keep the textures light. Track 6, Choral and Variation Andante Religioso. This is an intimate and religious chorale with variations. The movement is led into beautifully via the strings in the previous movement. The chorale has a flow to it, the chords connecting in the strings. The piano starts rising waves of octaves by the first minute, again, all played with a light touch. I should mention a chorale is set as chords and they're supposed to be sung in church, so whenever we hear it, it gives us a religious feel. You hear a lot of these in Bach's music. In fact, Bach wrote a lot of chorales. Track 7, Siciliane e Finale, Allegretto to Presto, starts as a Baroque Sicilienne and later transforms into a virtuoso tour de force. The rhythm from the attached previous movement suddenly changes here for the mid-tempo and rather cheerful Sicilienne. The pianos here are given figuration while the orchestra has the themes. At a minute and 18 seconds the finale begins and the orchestral part has some grandeur to it. Let's hear a little bit of that. The ending is big, but it's taken with some restraint here. Tracks 8 through 11, Franz Schubert and Franz Liszt. Grosse Fantasie Wanderer, S366, version for 2 pianos and orchestra by Alexander Tamir. And this features the pianists Tomer Lev and Berenika Glicksman. Now, Franz Schubert's Wanderer Fantasy is for solo piano. It's a pretty straightforward work. Liszt arranged this for solo piano and orchestra, so he really blew it up quite a bit. In the 20th century, Israeli pianist Aleksander Tamir prepared a version for 2 pianos and orchestra. Tamir modified Liszt's virtuosic elements, bringing the piano writing closer to the Schubertian realm, redistributed dense textures between the pianos for clarity, and reinforced the solo part in challenging passages for better balance between the pianos and orchestra. Track 5, Allegro con fuoco ma non troppo. This is the first movement. It's really a 4-connected movement work. So track 8, Allegro con fuoco ma non troppo, has the orchestra with the opening theme, and then the pianos come in with the theme a bit romanticized as Liszt had added some poetic pauses. At 1 minute and 34 seconds, the pianos have a quieter extended section, and then the opening theme is back in the pianos. We then get a development of the theme whose material travels through various keys. There's a pretty 2-piano arrangement of the second theme at 3 minutes and 40 seconds. Hearing this movement gives the material grandeur and elegance of a romantic kind, especially in Liszt's hands. The movement slows and attaches to the next movement. Track 9, Adagio. The movement starts with tolling chords in the 2 pianos. It sounds funereal. The 2 pianists are brilliant at the romantic style, giving it a rich feel that goes with the recorded sound, and they are in sync in such a way that they seem to be reading each other's approach. I like the accompanying chord bass line in one piano as the other plays the theme. By the 2 minute and 50-second marks, a stormy section begins, and we heard the beginning of that, and the solo pianists come in agitated. We hear the theme we sampled earlier in a lighter, almost Mozartian classical guise with an arpeggiated chord bass. A cello is in at the 3 minute and 52-second mark to play the theme, which it sweetens with vibrato. There's some pretty figure playing high up in the range of one of the pianos at 4 minutes and 20 seconds or so. The end of the movement builds towards a climax, and there's some impressive hushed bass line playing from the pianos as the orchestra intones the theme. The pianos eventually stop, leading to the next movement, track 10, Presto. This is the scherzo and has a playful feel in the pianos. A more emphatic section occurs straight afterwards. The trio section starts at 2 minutes and 22 seconds and is orchestrated with nasal reeds opening the section. The pianos play a pretty music box-like theme. And Schubert had loads of themes like that, too. He really just had so many fantastic ideas. The orchestra and second piano bring out the toy-like quality of this theme as arranged and orchestrated here. The opening theme then comes back. The cadence is interrupted by the beginning of the last movement, track 11, Allegro. This starts as a polyphonic movement with counter melodies featuring the first movement's theme, each getting its chance in the spotlight. There's some Lisztian playing in the first minute. A long approach to climax begins in the middle of the movement, which has a lot of sparkling pianism from the duo, beautifully placed and played. The final cadence is led up to with fanfares. Tracks 12 and 13, Franz Schubert, arranged by Ernst Pauer, 1826 to 1905. Grande Marche for 2 pianos in 8 hands. Okay, so we had 40 fingers again here. This features Tomer Lev, Berenika Glicksman, Alon Kari, and Nimrod Meiri Haftel on the pianos. Originally composed for a piano duet in 4 hands, and later arranged for 2 pianos in 8 hands by Ernst Pauer here. Track 12, March in B minor, D819 number 3, starts with a heavy tread that, because of the number of hands, can keep independent lines moving. Again, this is neatly performed, but does slightly color out of the lines at times, a quality I like with this kind of music. At 2 minutes and 45 seconds, a more melodic, less severe theme comes in, and I'm going to sample that one. The dynamic is piano, and the sound and balance are all very clean. The opening march theme then comes back. Track 13 is the march in E major, D819, number 6. This starts quietly with some athleticism and some energy in the lift of the theme. The work goes pretty quickly into a quieter section in the first minute before returning to the opening theme. The B section is heralded by a fanfare at 2 minutes and 20 seconds and is rather pretty. It picks up rhythmic energy as it goes. This particular section has a lot of detail in the multiple hands playing it. At the 4 minute and 40 second mark, the opening theme comes back and leads to the end. This is a record for lovers of piano curiosities, and I know there are a lot of them out there. The album itself is very neatly performed, not a note out of place, and the production as well as the performance makes everything sound dynamically even. One often has the illusion that one is listening to a 4 or even 8-armed pianist, though a rather restrained one. We do get a bit of dynamic overstepping in the marches in tracks 12 and 13, but it's very mild. I think that, played by amateurs, this music would sound more cacophonous, and I would have welcomed a bit more of that quality here. But what we have is a very professional-sounding traversal of works we're unlikely to hear played live, due to the forces involved. I think I wanted to be overwhelmed by the sheer sound of this, but instead I was treated to expert performances of rarely heard works or rarely heard arrangements. To be honest, if I were overwhelmed, I probably wouldn't want to hear this often, and this is an album that I could see listening to again. So pleasantly does it fall on the ear.
I thought these were really enjoyable performances. It's nice that there's an ensemble dedicated to performing and recording these kind of works. I found that really interesting. And considering the number of fingers at work in certain pieces, things are quite balanced, measured, and musical. It doesn't rise to the level of volume that you might think when you hear 40 fingers. But the recording has a good balance also between the pianos and orchestra. And I thought the sonics overall were very pleasing when I listened to it in headphones and both on my large speakers. So I think I'll have another listen to it sometime in the future as well.
Yeah, it's really well presented and, really expertly executed.
Makes me wonder what else is out there in terms of repertoire for, a group like this.
Well, there is another album by them, and I'm sure they're going to do more, so.
Yeah.
So our last disguised ensemble of the night is the string quartet as jazz ensemble. This album is called Milestones, the Jazz Album, and it's by a quartet we really like, the Quatuor Ebène. This is Pierre Colombet, violin, Gabriel Lemagadour, violin, Marie Chilem, viola, and Raphael Merlan, cello. On the Erato label again, this was released on October 4th. All right, we last encountered Quatuor Ebène on Adult Music on episode 38, Organic High, back on November 29th, 2021, when we talked about their classical album that had a jazz name, Around Midnight, an album which featured fantastic performances of two night-themed works, Henri Dutilleux's Ainsi la Nuit for string quartet and Arnold Schoenberg's sextet Verklärte Nacht. As if that weren't enough, the Ebène's cellist, Raphael Merlan, contributed a piece called Night Bridge, placed between the two works and serving as a bridge between them. It included his takes on tunes like Moon River, Night and Day, Stella by Starlight, and of course, Round Midnight. It was an imaginative program, a very special album that I'd encourage listeners to hear. Well, this album is the logical next step for the quartet. They did release a fantastic album of Mozart quintets with Antoine Tamistit on the second viola last year, in between these two releases, but we didn't cover that on Adult Music, and we probably should have. All tracks were arranged for string quartet here by the Ebène's cellist Raphael Merlan, who over the years has shown himself to be their secret weapon. He's such a good arranger that he has started to do it professionally, and this is apparently his last recording as the Quatuor Ebène's cellist. There'll certainly be a different ensemble without him. His personality has guided the ensemble into a good deal of the music they play. The Ebène have recorded a lot of Merlin's arrangements. These are the remainder of his arrangements that hadn't yet been recorded. All are arrangements of jazz classics, and this album can act as a bridge into the jazz albums we'll be talking about next. First, Kenny Kirkland, Dienda. Dienda was first recorded for Branford Marsalis's 1986 album Royal Garden Blues. The rhythm is given a sort of lilt that makes me think a bit of Dvorak or even Florence Price, but the harmony is much more contemporary than the works of those composers. It's really the harmony that stands out in this arrangement. The whole timbre of the four strings draws attention to it. One of the violins gets a solo arrangement at 1 minute and 42 seconds, very song-like. The arrangement is straightforward. The theme comes back at the end, as in a jazz tune. Track 2, Miles Davis, Milestones. This is the title track. Here the cello plays a quick pizzicato walking bass, circling around. The original had soft bursts of brass as the sort of theme, and here that's softened even further by the string tone, though the attack is sharp. Let's hear it. I probably should have let that solo go a little bit. It was pretty entertaining. The track has a rushing feel to it. It's impressive virtuosically. The violin again gets a solo, which has some rustic inflections to it. This lasts less than 3 minutes and really flies by. It's entertaining, but there's not all that much to it in this arrangement. Track 3, Toots Thielmans, Bluesette, a single from 1963 originally. The cello plays like a jazz bass here, with an improvised pizzicato opening. We hear the theme at about the 45-second mark, and I'm going to sample that. The theme comes across as highly romantic here, as you heard, and with a light ballroom feel to it. There's a Stefan Grappelli-like solo at 1 minute and 45 seconds, which I'm still hearing some rustic lines in. A more thread-like set of lines comes after the solo and leads us to the end of the track. Track 4, Errol Garner, Misty, one of the most famous jazz compositions of all time. It was written and recorded in 1954 and released on Errol Garner's album Contrasts. The quartet here goes for a gauzy tone and plays the tune with great sentimentality. Actually, now that I'm hearing that again, I'm going to take that back. It's not really so sentimental. The chords used, the harmonies, sort of take away a bit of the sentimentality of the playing of the melodic line. There's a bit of syrup in the arrangement, though, which is nevertheless affectionately played. The ensemble really caressing the melody out of the instruments. Track 5, Charles Mingus, Fables of Faubus, from the album Mingus from 1959. This comes across as exceptionally folksy and rustic in this arrangement. I think it's the smooth attack of the bows on the strings that gives it this quality. When I hear like a string quartet playing this music, I think of the original jazz version of it as being more like crunchy peanut butter, and the string quartet version is creamy peanut butter. You know, you're missing that sort of crunch from it. It's just so smooth. Anyway, let's give a listen to this and see what it comes up like. To say, though, the quartet has a really good feel for the rhythm, though.
Yeah.
It's well achieved by the walking bass, and there's an impressive speeding up of the material at 1 minute and 40 seconds for a brief departure from the theme. The theme keeps returning after some stormy harmony. Mingus was a pretty adventurous harmonist, and the character of the work is completely transformed from the original jazz performance in this particular arrangement. Track 6, Wayne Shorter, Anna Maria. Shorter composed this for his wife, Anna Maria Patricio, and it appeared on his 1975 album Native Dancer. The theme comes in at about 45 seconds after an intro and has a Latin rhythm to it, communicated by the cello's pizzicato bass line as the violin gets the melody, and the two inner voices play a counterpointed theme. It's creative arranging by Merlin, who has all members of the ensemble playing interesting parts and not merely accompanying. In the third minute, there's a more abstract section with a rather thoughtful solo from the violin, accompanied only by cello, whose pizzicato echoes and answers his lines. It's an interesting duet, and again, creative arranging. We should hear a bit of that. Yeah, I kind of hate to come out of that solo. It's some pretty interesting ideas in there.
Funky bass line, too.
Yeah. There's a bit of roiling chaos when the two other strings come back in, and everything settles back into the theme. This is one of the more adventurous arrangements on the album. Track 7, Thelonious Monk, Round Midnight, possibly written as early as 1938, copyrighted in 1943, and published in 1944. The composition's first recording was made by trumpeter Cootie Williams in 1944, and Monk himself first recorded it in 1947. And that recording later appeared on the Blue Note album, Genius in Modern Music, Volume 1. The arrangement here is interesting. The bowing is heavy, and the cello gets the theme, which is then passed around. Let's hear this very famous opening. I really like the dark emotion this is given in this arrangement. It's pretty creative. It sounds anguished in this performance, the Ebène drawing a lot of heavy feeling from the theme and harmony. The theme is rearranged to the various voices of the quartet, and the arrangement takes full advantage of the four voices. Creative arranging by Merlin here, as throughout the album. The first violin eventually gets the melody to himself in the third minute, and his lighter tone gives it freedom to sing a bit. The middle voices harmonize darkly, and again, I like the pizzicato cello's sensitively taken line. It's a unique arrangement and a committed performance. Track 8, Miles Davis, All Blues. All Blues, of course, appeared on one of the most famous jazz albums of all time, Kind of Blue, recorded and released in 1959. The arrangement starts with a trilling harmony. The pizzicato bass starts the rhythm, and we hear middle voices playing the famous swaying chord figure. Merlin's arrangement keeps several patterns going at once. A kind of Grappellian violin jazz line comes out of the violin at 2 minutes and 30 seconds. The violin starts an accelerando over rising chords. The cello then gets a pizzicato solo at about the 3 minute and 30 second mark. And I want to hear what the arranger gave himself here. This is pretty interesting. Just starting to build up and get interesting there, and I'm coming out of it. The track ends without a real resolve. Track 9, Pee Wee Ellis, The Chicken, an instrumental funk tune that was originally the B-side to James Brown's 1969 single, The Popcorn,
Yeah.
which is not to be confused with the more famous Mother Popcorn. The most famous of a series of recordings James Brown made that were inspired by the popular dance of the time called The Popcorn. My favorite of these recordings is Let a Man Come In and Do the Popcorn. What a great title. You can imagine what the popcorn is like. I imagine it's like when the kernel pops. You can probably check it out on YouTube. Jaco Pastorius gave it greater exposure by doing various versions of it. Slashing trebly strings begin this track, followed by light staccato scrapings on the violins and cello that eventually develop into a rhythm and pattern of their own. Eventually, a bass line develops into the pizzicato cello. The violin has a heavy barnyard feel in his solo at 1 minute and 45 seconds. There's a pretty good bluesy string solo at 2 minutes and 45 seconds by the first violin. Let's hear some of that. The middle voices get a solo together, playing in harmony as the cello provides a contrapuntal bass line. The solos end on a harsh chord, then the opening rhythm slowly breaks apart until there are just suggestions of it left, as we heard at the beginning. Excellent arranging here. And finally, track 10, Charles Mingus, Goodbye Pork Pie Hat. Another tune from Mingus Aum, written as an elegy for pork pie hat-wearing saxophonist Lester Young, who had died 2 months prior to the recording. The Quatuor Ebène use a gauzy, muted tone for the opening. The cello plays a bit of an introductory solo in a rather lively manner as the rest of the quartet wander together from chord to chord. When the violin comes in for his solo turn, he gets a creditable wailing sound from his inflections. This comes across as a slow, dragging, lamenting blues in a way that you normally don't associate with string quartets. The feel is very good, and that's a credit to the arrangement. I want to sample one of the more straightforward iterations of the theme, about 3 minutes and 15 seconds into the recording. The theme itself reaches full harmonized splendor at about the 4 minute and 30-second mark when it's finally played by the upper voices. The track ends with the theme sort of dissipating when lightly played by a solo violin. And that's the album. Basically, what we have here is an album of encores, and it comes across that way. The themes of these works are front and center and are never far away. There's nothing very heavy here, though the arrangement of Round Midnight does evoke a dark, heavy feeling. It kind of reminds me of the arty, hip Turtle Island Quartet albums of the late 1980s and early 1990s when they were recording for Windham Hill. It's entertaining. I have to point out the creativity in the arrangements made by Merlin, though. In the spirit of Haydn and Mozart, he gives all four voices interesting parts. They're always in dialogue with each other, especially during solo sections. This is especially true in the violin and cello duet in Wayne Shorter's Anna Maria, which we sampled. That's a standout moment on the album for me. The Quatuor Ebène play all of these works with great affection, but to me, the star of the show is Raphael Merlin's arrangements, and that's as it should be. I'm sure the creativity he brought to this ensemble will be missed with his departure.
Yeah, this was cool to hear classical musicians who can improvise and know and have a good sense of a feeling of jazz. That's very cool. This was enjoyable overall as a recording. Sometimes I thought it was a bit ethereal, like you were talking about the smooth peanut butter version of something. Right. But other times the arrangements were really inventive, and I thought the harmonies were brought out in interesting ways that you could only get out of strings and you wouldn't hear, in a jazz quartet or something. So my ear found spots like that. As far as the feels went, most of it I enjoyed. Milestones felt a bit hurried to me. On the other hand, I thought All Blues was really in the groove, and I liked that. And Pee Wee Reese's The Chicken was a really fun surprise, and that had a really great bass line in it. So I was happy to hear that. Yeah, why not? It was a lot of fun, and it was another recording where I heard these pieces, this time in a different way. The first recording, we heard classical pieces interpreted in a pop setting, and here we're hearing these jazz works in a, not really classical, but in a quartet format, which is going to bring out different aspects of them. And that was interesting as well.
Yeah, and you really pulled something out about what a string quartet is all about. It's all about the harmony, because that's really what comes out the most strongly. And that's what composers are after. They really want to get some sort of harmonic framework going for you to listen to in a classical piece. And Merlin is so good at just pulling out those harmonies here and arranging them in a really interesting way. This is sort of a, if you want to call a crossover, that awful word again. It's a crossover album that works really well.
And you get that unique blend. Strings are only going to have this kind of blend that you're not going to get in another combination. Similarly, when I played in a brass quintet, I found, arrangements of works sounded uniquely, wonderfully sonorous, the way brass blends together. Yeah, here it's with strings, and knowing the original versions of these tunes, I'm hearing, all of these parts of the harmony spread out in different types of instrument families. Hearing them on strings was kind of eye-opening. All right, and speaking of jazz, it's time to move over onto the jazz side. Past few weeks, I've been, working on discovering new artists for us and getting a lot of European things in that I thought were not going to be talked about in any kind of English media. It's one of the most important things for me doing this podcast. Today we'll have a mix of things. We're going to start out in France, then we're going to come back to the US, and we're going to actually talk about one release that everybody's talking about, but I think we should talk about it too, just for a special reason. Anyway, we'll start out in France. Just as last week we heard a drummer and composer, we're going to hear one from France again this week, and that's Benjamin Sanz. His group Directions. The recording's called Black Seeds, and it's on the MiRR label. It's MiRR. It came out October 11th. Drummer, composer, and producer Benjamin Sanz has been involved in a lot of projects influenced by American and African black music, such as the group Benkadi with Hervé Sam, the Afro-Cuban free music ensemble Los Pistoleros del Infinito, and the quartet Divine Pocket Bouncers. It's an interesting name. For 8 years, until 2014, he co-organized a weekly musical laboratory in Paris, promoting the exhibition of different improvised music scenes to a large audience. And he's the initiator of this MiRR collective, which is based in Paris. It's an artistic association. And since 2020, this collective has also been working as a music label, which is where this album is coming out of. As a sideman, he's played internationally with big names like David Murray, Archie Shepp, and Oliver Lake. And Benjamin Sanz has two previous releases as a leader, Mutation Majourée in 2011 and The Escape in 2020. And this recording, Black Seeds, is more of a personal and of African inspiration, the notes say. On the recording, Benjamin Sanz on drums, contrabass, Luca Fattorini, and we've heard him all the way back in episode 48, Crafty Complications. That was on the recording Explorers on the Jazz and People label by Alexis Vallée, the vibraphonist. On piano, we've got Rob Clearfield, an American from the state of Illinois. On tenor saxophone, Ricardo Izquierdo. And on trumpet, Armon Mehari. Sound engineer on the recording, Vincent Mahé. Mastering engineer, Raphael Honin. And mixing engineer, Vincent Mahé. Recording is going to start out with a Sanz composition, Morning Song. It starts out with an 8-measure bass and drum intro. The bass line is jumpy, and when the horn melody comes in, it has a jumpy, syncopated character too. Over the 24 measures, it moves toward a more smooth swing feel, and the bass and drums match that. Clearfield is up first for a piano solo, and you'll hear that the solos are following a 12-bar blues progression. Let's hear the recording get started. Nice ideas on the piano there. Later on, Izquierdo and Mehari get to play some simultaneous improvisations, so let's check out a little bit of that as well. Work it back into another round of the jumpy melody that ends with a harmonic surprise. Track 2, Bamako Stomp, another Sanz original composition. Sanz starts this one out and gets joined by Clearfield on the Rhodes. This is a very tricky beat and meter. I'm not really sure, but it sounds like alternating measures of 4 and 5 beats. The horns are syncopated and jumpy to match, and the percussive Rhodes chords sound really cool. Let's take a listen. I really like that Rhodes sound. Izquierdo and Mehari trade off solo sections, both with smooth lines that contrast with the popping beats below. Let's check out a little of that. horns join up on some synced lines there. There's a rhythm section lead up to another round of the melody with some nice fills on the drums from Sanz. It's a really tricky rhythmic tune. Track 3, Quatuor. This is a composition by Ricardo Izquierdo. This one starts out with a lot of rhythmic change-ups and a big pause once the horn melody starts. You're not sure what's coming next, although the pulse becomes more regular. Is off to solo from there, and Izquierdo follows. Let's check out some of his sax playing on his own composition. Will join back together, which ushers in a solo from Clearfield. It works to a final horn phrase to end the tune. Track 4, Cindini. This is a Sanz original. Cindini is a village in the Comoros Islands off the coast of Africa. This is a hypnotic one with Rhodes and a riffy horn phrase. Listening to the bass pattern and Rhodes, it sounds like alternating 5 and 4 beat measures with the horn lines staggered over them. See what you think. Interesting changes of modes and moods, and the horn lines continue to evolve. Mahadi has some nice modal ideas in his trumpet solo, so let's check out some of his playing. nice smooth soloing. Clearfield gets a ringing Rhodes solo and carries on with tasty fills when the horn melody returns. The horns trade and have some simultaneous improvisations as it fades out. It's a very exotic mood. Track 5 is called River. This is a free improvisation. Like a slow river, things flow on rather leisurely with some primal cries from Izquierdo over Sanz's tom tones. Let's hear the beginning of this. As it goes on, Mahari's trumpet emerges too, and the horn river beasts seem to both disappear into the weeds, leaving Clearfield to decorate the final section with piano. Track 6, another Sanz composition, Colline, Dans les Jardins. This has evolving legato horn lines and unpredictable phrasing. The meter is kind of disguised, but takes on a feel of 3 beats that becomes more clear with rim clicks from Sanz. Fattorini is up first for a bass solo there, then Mehari on trumpet. The horn melody returns with some extended syncopated lines for an ending. Track 7 is called Turbulent Streams, another improvised piece. River, the previous one, was slow-moving, but this one has more motion with a constant trickle of piano runs from Clearfield and dancing cymbals from Sanz. The horns snake and flutter, but join in on some waterfowl-like final cries. I'll leave it to you to check this one out. Track 8, a Benjamin Sanz original, The Psychopomp. Very slow, but very pretty. The 16-measure melody has lovely harmonized legato horn lines over Sanz's brushwork, and Mahari's trumpet tone sounds great here. nice start from Izquierdo on his solo there with an airy and fluffy tone. On this tune, Fattorini gets a melodic bass solo, so let's hear a little bit of his playing. Nice deep tone, and the horn melody will return to a delicate ending to the tune. And the recording is going to finish up with the final Sanz composition, C. Interesting rhythmic change-ups here. It gets started with a Latin beat for the intro. After 10 measures, things are off swinging on a horn melody for 23 measures, and then it's back to Latin for a bit before a swinging start to Mahari's trumpet solo. Let's hear it get going. He's got a lot of ideas and very fluid lines. Let's hear one more solo from Clearfield on this tune. Very nice drive and left-hand punctuation. The horns are returning there into a little vamping section where Sanz works up some energy on the drums into a final phrase. Echoing last week when we heard Olivier Robin, this time we've got another French drummer-composer in Benjamin Sanz. His compositions are unique with a sense of logic, but still lots of surprises. I especially enjoyed the last two tunes, the Psychopomp and C. Izquierdo contributes an original, and there are two improvised tunes as well. Sanz flows between meters and feels fluidly, giving us Latin beats, driving swing, and some soft brush ballading. He generously gives the solo spotlight to his sidemen, and they have inspired ideas. Mahari's trumpet playing is fluid and agile, and Izquierdo shows a range between intense and breathy. Clearfield's solos on the piano are tasty with a nice touch, and his fills also caught my ear throughout. Fattorini's bass locks in the grooves, and he has 2 melodic solos of his own. The album has an interesting overall free-flowing atmosphere.
I thought this album was a bit out there, really. It uses the piano, the distorted Fender Rhodes, and for me, that distorted Rhodes kind of set the tone for the album. The production itself had a bit of grunge to it, very upfront, with no gleam to the sound, if you know what I mean. It put me in mind of those 90s, grunge albums, by those
Really?
Seattle bands in a way, just by the sound, not the actual instrumentation or the, things like that. The playing all around is strong and emphatic. Even on ballads like the Psychopomp, the soloists play out with tonal strength on the theme and solos. They don't ever, soften the sound at all. And despite this, the band manages to put sensitivity across when required. Soloists are recorded closely, and harmonies like to wander in these themes, and I enjoyed that. When there was harmony, those 2 tracks that are chaotic with free improvisation, like Turbulent Streams and River.
Yeah.
And I have to say, just with those 2 titles, and given that they're free improv, Sanz seems to have a dark, troubling relationship with water. From
the Psychopomp and water. Yeah, okay, interesting.
Yeah, and Turbulent Streams too. River, This album puts across something a bit darker than we usually hear, possibly having to do with elemental qualities of nature, as the title Black Seeds suggests to me. I'd say this is a mildly adventurous listen, although in the samples, I was really enjoying hearing it. I thought the playing was really great, and I was like, I should probably listen to this again.
Yeah, well, another interesting recording from France, and we'll keep checking out those European musicians.
Yeah, they're pretty inventive.
We'll come back to the U.S. for the rest of this episode. Diego Rivera's Ofrenda on Posi-Tone came out October 11th. Diego Rivera, saxophonist, was born in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and raised in East Lansing. Born into a Mexican-American family, he's an associate professor of jazz saxophone at Michigan State University, where he also serves as associate director of jazz studies. We've heard most of his recent releases on the podcasts going back to episode 52, Sexually Promiscuous. We heard Mestizo.
I forgot that title.
Better forgotten. Of course, that was on Posi-Tone too. Episode 104, Tours de Force, Love and Peace, came out in February of 2023. Episode 152, Winter Winds, and we heard With Just a Word. That came out in February of this year, and that was with Pete Rodriguez on trumpet. And we've heard him on quite a few albums as a sideman too. I might have given this one a skip just because I do so many Posi-Tone recordings. It's one of my favorite labels. But I'm glad that I decided to put this one into an episode. Once I heard it, it's really great. We get Terrell Stafford, an exciting trumpet player who we really like. And I think this is my favorite program of original compositions from Rivera so far, mixing in a strong 60s vibe with Latin influences. Particularly, there's a theme around the Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos, a Mexican tradition. And I thought, once I heard that and looked at the titles, I said, oh, this will kind of go with Mike's Halloween theme as well. Different country, same general time frame, right? And not to mention, this recording has our favorite Posi-Tone house rhythm section. Just had to play it for everyone. So we've got Diego Rivera on all original compositions here, tenor sax, soprano sax on one track, Terrell Stafford on trumpet, Art Hirahara piano, Boris Kozlov on bass, Rudy Royston on drums. As always on Posi-Tone, Mark Fries, the producer, Nick O'Toole, the engineer. And if the Bandcamp data is right, this says recorded June 21st, 2024 at Acoustic Recording, Brooklyn, New York. That's some fast production turnaround.
It makes sense because he put out an album earlier this year too.
Right.
So
yeah. Mixed and mastered at Woodland Studio, Lake Oswego, Oregon. The recording gets underway with Volver, a neat Latin beat minor tune with a 60s atmosphere. It starts out with a horn line pickup that's a phrase we'll hear from the ending of the second section of the melody. That leads into 8 measures of rhythm section intro, and then the horn melody, a nice clicky beat from Royston. Let's hear this melody. seems to end up a measure earlier than you expect. Rivera's up first for a solo, so let's jump right back in and hear what he has to say on this first tune. That horn line again as a transition to a solo from Stafford. He takes some chances as usual for an exciting trumpet solo, and that shift away from the minor mode is really fun when it comes in the progression, releasing the tension. Hirahara has a popping piano solo in this one too, once more through the melody, finishes it up with some nice fills from Royston at the end. Track 2, Fotografias. This is a wistful feeling tune with a light bouncing beat. There's an 8-measure intro with a great loping bass arpeggio from Kozlov. The melody is a 16-measure repeating idea started by Rivera. Stafford joins in near the end with harmonies and takes the lead on the repeat. Let's hear it. Stafford continues on with a melodic solo with a fun mix of articulation. Rivera follows with a smoothly phrased solo. Let's check out Art Hirahara's solo on this one. Classy ideas as always, and back into a little reset there for the melody to return with a slowed down coda ending and some bowed bass at the end from Kozlov. 2 tunes in, and this album has me in a good mood already. Track 3, Pan de Muerto. Funky, fun 60s styles here with a touch of New Orleans. There's a 16-measure intro from the great rhythm section, setting the groove with nice piano ideas from Hirahara. The horn melody is fun, creating an expectation of an altered 12-bar blues progression, but the fun harmonic diversion from the 11th measure gets it stretched to 14 measures, and they'll repeat it, but the solos will follow a 12-bar blues progression. Let's check it out. getting going there first, and then Rivera follows. Kozlov is really making the bass chug along underneath. It's time to check out a solo from Stafford on this tune. Bluesy excitement and some great high register ideas. The horns trade a few phrases with Royston into a longer drum solo and a return of the intro into a couple final rounds of the melody and final phrase repeats to end it. It's a really cool tune. Track 4, Cempasúchil, The Marigolds, a waltzing ballad with a lovely 38-measure horn melody. It constantly evolves, but has familiar phrases that stick with you and make it sound familiar right away. Let's hear this melody get going. Stafford continues on from there with a solo started gently, but with some hot double-time licks. Rivera follows, getting some extra push from walking bass lines of Kozlov. Let's hear his solo on this one. Ornamental turns in his phrases and the triplet figures. Hirahara has a piano solo next from there, and Kozlov gets a short solo with the horns picking up the melody after 18 measures. While we're here, let's hear a little bit of his playing. Finish up the melody, and the outro has soft touches from Hirahara to bring it to a gentle ending. Track 5, Kosas. Speaking of Kozlov, he's got a cool rising line with Hirahara's left hand as a pickup phrase into the intro of this modal tune. Royston's energetic drumming is great. The horn melody is 24 measures, and we hear that opening bass phrase drive into Rivera's solo. He's really on fire here, and he keeps pushing it with rhythmic phrases, working up to some intense cries. Let's come back and hear how this just keeps building and building. Yeah, that's quite a solo. Stafford's up next, and they bring it down to build up the intensity once more, climaxing in some crazy trumpet shakes. It's a lot of fun. Hirahara gets the last solo with some blazing, speedy lines and percussive chords. After return of the horn melody, they vamp out for Royston to work around the drum kit and build it up to a final phrase. Don't miss that ending. Track 6, Papel Picado, perforated or pecked paper. This is the traditional Mexican decorative craft. They cut little designs that are kind of elaborate into tissue paper. This one has a real Mexican kind of ambiance to it and a cute nostalgic sound with cup-muted trumpet from Stafford on the 32-measure melody and Rivera's on soprano sax on this. There into a muted solo from Stafford. If that didn't make you smile, please see your physician in the morning. This is the only tune with Rivera on soprano sax. Let's hear his solo on this one. stuff from Hirahara there as well. Kozlov has a great melodic bass solo on this song too, before the horns are back with the melody to wrap it up. Track 7, La Calavera, the skull. The horn lines that start this are a 2-measure pickup, and actually the last 2 measures of the 3 sections of this 24-measure melody. Drum melody, that is, because it's Royston's show, with the horns coming in for the last 8-measure segment. Rivera is launched immediately into a solo. Let's hear this high-energy tune start out. Yeah. And we're going to check out Stafford's solo on this one that shows why he's such an exciting player. He gets off the path into some dangerous spots here, but he always lands on his feet. Quite an adventurous solo there. Hirahara's solo is rhythmically intense on this one too. And while we're here, let's hear some of Royston going right to the end where the horns return. Track 8, Cruise, The Cross. This short piece is connected to the next track. Royston's snare drum creates a slow processional feel, and Hirahara's chiming chords evoke church bells. Maybe it's an image of a festival parade down the street. I'll give you a little sample from where the horn melody comes in after that mood has been set by the rhythm section. At the end of the horn melody, Kozlov has a bass solo that continues into an ostinato figure that starts track 9, Velas, Candles. This has a longing 18-measure horn melody and lush chord backing from Hirahara. It's very peaceful sounding. I'll leave you to check that out. The highlight here is Stafford's simple but heartfelt trumpet solo, so let's check that out. Rivera has a fine solo too. The horns are back to build it to a climax and a pause to a gentle ending with bowed bass underneath. And the recording ends up with Esqueleto, the skeleton. This is a fun Latin number with a 6-beat feel. Royston kicks it into a rhythmic piano intro from Hirahara. Rivera gets the melody going over just the drums. It's in an AABA shape with 10-measure A sections. Piano and drums join in on the repeat, and then Stafford is in from the B section. Let's hear it get started. Some more piano, building up excitement to solos from Rivera and then Stafford. Art Hirahara always sounds great on Latin tunes, so let's hear one more from him on this tune. Coming back in there from the B section to a very neat ending to the recording. I think this is my favorite Rivera release so far. It's got a magical mix of funky 60s style tunes and diverse Latin styles that include this unique softer side like on Cruz and Velas. It's great to have Stafford's trumpet on the melody lines together, which brings all the tunes to the next level. As we've said dozens of times, this rhythm section is top-notch. Royston, Hirahara, and Kozlov. Outstanding solos by Rivera and everyone, as you heard in the samples. a theme around Dia de los Muertos, and you'd have to be dead or some kind of ghoul to not enjoy this recording.
Actually, according to that movie Coco that Disney put out a few years ago, even the dead would enjoy this.
I think so.
It's hard to know what to say about albums with this lineup on them because they're all so good.
Yeah.
And they always deliver performances of good sound that satisfy, the jazz side of my soul. Okay, on this particular one, I thought the album, it plays into Mexican themes more as it goes on, even though the titles kind of start, indicating them. And on tracks like Cruz and Velas, I thought of that the brass were kind of like, had a mariachi sort of
out in the street kind of feel, yeah.
Yeah. And in Esqueleto had a bony quality to the way it's presented, especially at the beginning with the sax and the drums only with no bass. There's something kind of dry and, you know what I mean? It's kind of
skeletal, yeah.
Yeah, skeletal, yeah. The album includes some lighter Latin dance rhythms on the way and, some 60-oriented popular jazz at the beginning. It's exciting playing as always, elegant when it's not exciting. Well, it's elegant can be exciting too, I guess, but you know what I mean. Anyway, the performances are great, and I look forward to albums from these musicians at this point, the way people in the 50s or 60s look forward to recordings of the jazz giants. They're so good. They're always interesting. So, of course, this is recommended.
Yeah, it's great. Posi-Tone has this core of musicians that get together in various combinations, and we hear some different players switched in sometimes, but this is my favorite core of these three rhythm players. And we always like to hear Diego Rivera. He's got that real muscular sax tone, and he really turns on the intensity. He writes good stuff as well. Really like Terrell Stafford's exciting trumpet playing, and it's a winning combination all the way around. I don't choose many vocal recordings, Mike, because
you don't.
I basically prefer instrumental music, and I'm very picky with vocalists.
Yes, I am aware of that.
There's only a few jazz vocalists that I really like. I even passed over one of my favorite vocalists, Catherine Russell's recent release, just because there was so much instrumental music that I wanted to talk about.
Well, I want to say that Catherine Russell album was pretty great.
I like it.
It. Yeah. It's piano on this one only. So
yeah, that was my only slight disappointment.
I didn't think that was disappointing. I thought it was really great playing.
It was to me just because I loved the band that she's been working with, and I love how they interpret those older styles of music.
Right.
Here we've got another vocalist that we both really like, Samara Joy, the young vocalist who started attracting attention after she won the Sarah Vaughan International Jazz Vocal Competition in 2019. Her self-titled debut we talked about back in episode 23, just Samara Joy, Whirlwind Records back in 2021.
Well, we were young men back then.
Yeah.
Young podcasters anyway.
We also talked about her next recording in episode 89, Swingers. That was Linger a While, where she switched over to Verve Records. That came out in September of 2022. And, well, she's gone on to win Best New Artist at the 2023 Grammy Awards. That's not Best Jazz Artist, that's Best in all genres. Wow. So at age 24, in a real sense, she is the new face of jazz to a new generation. And I think that's a great thing. Well, she certainly doesn't need any help from us promoting her anymore, but...
Yeah, it looks like she's got, like, the machine kind of, or as much as you can get it for jazz promoting her.
But I was really impressed with where she's gone with this recording. Her first two recordings focused on songs from the Great American Songbook, and that's where a young singer should start out and show us how they compare to the great voices of the past. She could have continued on in that vein safely for a while, but here she's done something interesting and adventurous, taking on classic jazz instrumental tunes and adding her own lyrics. Her previous two albums were reminiscent more of, Sarah Vaughan and Ella Fitzgerald style. However, here it's more in the instrumental jazz tradition, really becoming part of the band rather than just fronting it. It's a quality I've admired in other great vocalists like Cassandra Wilson. So let's check out this new recording from Samara Joy, Portrait, on Verve. It came out October 11th. Produced by Samara Joy, as well as providing these amazing vocals, and the other producer of the album is Brian Lynch, so we know we're in good hands if he's involved because his albums have been fabulous. The band that she's working with here: trumpet and flugelhorn, Jason Charos; alto sax and flute, David Mason; tenor sax, Kendrick McAllister; trombone, Donovan Austin; piano, Connor Rohrer; on bass, Felix Mosholm; and on drums, Evan Sherman; engineer, Maureen Sickler; mixer, mastering engineer, David Darlington; and recorded at the great Rudy Van Gelder Studios.
That's a lot of instrumental timbre she has at her disposal in this recording.
Yeah, well, she's really got a septet, but she thinks of it as an octet, with her as one of the voices of the band. And we'll see how that works out here. We're going to start out with an old tune out of the songbook, You Stepped Out of a Dream. Music by Nasio Herb Brown, lyrics by Gus Kahn, recorded by Glenn Miller and his orchestra in 1941. That's digging back a ways. The arrangement here is by Jason Charos. Nice flute sounds in the horn lines, great answering bass lines to phrases here. Let's hear this recording get started and check out Samara Joy's phrasing and enunciation.
Out of a dream, you are too wonderful to be what you seem. Could there be eyes like yours? Could there be lips like yours? Could there be smiles like yours? Honest and truly, you stepped out of a cloud, and I wanna take you away from the crowd and have you all to myself, alone in a park, out of a dream, safe in my heart.
And into a piano solo from Connor Rohrer from there with nice horn backing lines. Charles gets a trumpet solo, and then we hear Joy joining in with vocalese, making her voice another horn line in the ensemble, and also getting into some scat improvisation, something we haven't heard much of from her in previous recordings. So let's check out some of that. And back to the lyrics there, and an exciting high register ending to the tune. Track 2, Reincarnation of a Lovebird, Charles Mingus, from the Charles Mingus Jazz Workshop 1957 recording The Clown. And this is a surprise choice, and we get an a cappella opening with original lyrics penned by Samara Joy. Let's hear some of how this gets going.
Only a dream to me you were, and then you slowly slipped away, an angel of the night and of the day. Our time has come, but will you ever return to love's arms? No eyes ever seen, no ears ever heard, no minds ever thought, no hearts ever
She brings it to a high climax. Let's jump back in once the band enters.
One kiss too far. Truth be told, I'd rather love you while you're in my dreams. Maybe then you'll learn to love me. If only it were that easy. Only a dream to me you were. And then you slowly slipped away, an angel of the night and of the day. Our time has come, but will you ever return to love's arms? No eyes ever seen, no ears ever heard, no minds ever known, no hearts ever sung. Love still an never-ending melody, but so is the sun, and dark is the moon, and sweet is the breeze. Together soon we'll be.
Wow. Nice swinging phrasing and working her voice like an instrumental line. You have to keep in mind that this song was not written to be sung, right? The horns get to trade off solo phrases as this one goes along, and they get things swinging together again into some stop time and a return of Samara Joy's vocals. She works things up over extended drumming from Sherman to another high note ending. Track 3, Autumn Nocturne. Music by Joe Miro. Lyrics by Kim Gannon, first recorded by Claude Thornhill and his orchestra in 1941. It's a lovely ballad arranged by Kendrick McAllister. Let's hear this one get going. This is the shortest track on the recording, but a really good arrangement, giving her voice some open space before the ending. Track 4, Peace of Mind, Dreams Come True. Well, Peace of Mind is her first original composition written along with McAllister, sort of a reflection on the pressures she faced from winning the Grammy Award. And that works into Dreams Come True, a tune by Sun Ra. There's an interesting combination of things stitched together here. Let's hear this get started with her original idea.
Where do you find your peace of mind? Is it in the places you go, or the people you meet? In time, you will realize all things will change. But does your peace of mind remain? Here lies your fate, give in or wait.
Really builds up some tension there, and she shows off some gospel inflection as this goes along. Now it transforms and gets more motion as it transitions into Sun Ra's dreams come true and the mood lightens. It's really hard to capture all of what's going on in short samples, but let's hear some of that transition.
Sometimes you feel like giving up, but don't ever lose hope. Just remember, sometimes you feel like giving up, but don't ever lose hope. Dreams come true, I know they do, if you believe in love. Mine came true and yours will too, I swear by the stars above. Dreams come true, they just have to, true as the sun above. Mine came true and yours will too, if you believe in love. Dream of rose.
There's some nice changes in rhythm there as well, and we'll hear that again with a waltzing switch up for an instrumental section before the swinging vocals return. Track 5, A Fool in Love, is called A Clown. This is a new composition by the trombonist Donovan Austin here, who's arranged it very nicely as well. It's new, but it's got the spirit of a jazz standard with a really fine arrangement. Let's hear this one get started.
Lonely winters are cold, no one to hold. I had you, but that's no more. Makes me stop and think, did I turn this romance upside down? The crown through the beat of my heart, I overlooked the part.
Yeah, really nice harmonies in this melody as well. For a change, let's jump in and hear the ending of this tune.
Yet I still hum the tune, 'cause I'm the lost buffoon, a fool who's in love is called a clown, clown.
A really gorgeous ending. Track 6, No More Blues. This is originally Chega de Saudade, Antonio Carlos Jobim tune from 1958. The original lyrics were written by Vinícius de Moraes. The English lyrics here written by Jesse Kavanaugh and singer John Hendricks. Time for a little Latin with a throbbing samba beat and the always nice combination of flute and Harmon muted trumpet in the horn lines, arranged here by Jason Choros.
No more blues, I'm going back home. No more dues, I promise no more to roam. Home is where the heart is. The funny part is my heart's been right there all along. No more tears and no more sighs, no more fears. I've said my last goodbye. If travel beckons me, I swear I'm gonna refuse. I'm gonna settle down and there'll be no more blues. Every day when I am far away, my thoughts turn homeward, forever homeward. I have traveled around the world in search of happiness, but all the happiness I've found.
Let's come back in and hear some more vocalizing and scatting on this tune. Yeah, great stuff. Reminding me a bit of Diane Reeves there. Trumpet and trombone get to trade off some fun improvised lines on this one too, and Samara Joy gets some more scatting in the final lines that build up to a big ending. Track 7, Now and Then, in remembrance of the composer here, Barry Harris, a song he recorded back in 1972. Samara Joy and Kendrick McAllister, who arranged this tune, studied with Barry Harris, who passed away in 2021, so this is a heartfelt dedication. Connor Rohrer makes a dreamy solo piano intro for this, and Samara Joy has written new original lyrics for this as well.
Time again, I wonder why leave us behind? Moments fade to sweet memories, fleeting as a faint summer breeze, but like the breeze I know.
Really gorgeous stuff. And the recording's going to end up with Day by Day, track 8. Alex Stortle, Paul Weston, Sammy Kahn, recorded in 1945, released in 1946 by none other than Frank Sinatra. Arranged here by David Mason. The recording ends up with some swinging fun and another great arrangement. Let's hear it get going.
Day by day, I'm falling more and more in love with you. Day by day, my love seems to grow. There isn't any end to my devotion. It's deeper, dear, by far than any ocean. I find that day by day you're making all my dreams come true. So come what may, I want you to know that I'm yours alone, and I'm in love to stay. We got through the years day by day.
let's hear some more of her voice as another instrument in the horn lines. Roar has a piano solo, and Austin gets an agile trombone solo on this one too. And Samara Joy's back swinging in full force for an exciting ending of the song. Well, let's just hear it.
Day by day you're making all my dreams come true. So come what may, I want you to know that I'm yours alone, and I'm in love to stay. Go through the years, as we go through the years, I'm yours alone, and I'm in love to stay. As we go through the years, day by day, day by
Following her career from her debut, we can see that Samara Joy has gained power and confidence as a vocalist. This recording presents a new level of artistry beyond just a great voice singing tunes from the American songbook. Joy has moved into adapting classic jazz compositions from Mingus, Barry Harris, and even Sun Ra, using her voice like an instrument and even composing her own lyrics and an original tune. We hear more vocalizing and scat singing too. This setting is all made possible by the great arrangements from the musicians here, Kendrick McAllister, David Mason, and Jason Charles. I'm sure Brian Lynch was key in making this come off so well, maximizing all of the talent involved. The program and the arrangements are unique and engaging. She's not a singer fronting a band, but part of this octet. Excellent all around. What will she do next?
Yeah, I'd have to agree. This is really a real step in a new and maybe even higher level direction for her. There's a lot more power to her voice here. I hear the confidence too. Now, she says, and you mentioned too, that she's really part of the band, like kind of another instrument. But I feel like, maybe it's just my classical background. If you're singing words, you're still going to be zeroed into as sort of like the front person. Of course, I was listening to her mostly. And I feel like her Sarah Vaughan vibes really showed on this album, especially in her lower end. And she got some really exciting high-end notes, too, like Ella used to get. Yeah, her vocal tone and phrasing are what we want to hear most. And, that's what I was listening to. It's really unique. And the new power really kind of drew me as well. The tunes vary from ballads to more upbeat tracks. And she handles both extremely well. This is like an all-around great singer. It's a deeply satisfying jazz album and performance. And also, it's a fair length for a jazz album with 8 tracks coming in at 48 minutes. That's fair.
Yeah.
But, you hear singing like this, you wish it were longer. Like maybe 1 or 2 more tracks. It's inevitable that you'd want that. But yeah, this is really great. It has to be heard, I think.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe they'll have some more bonus tracks or something like that. You never know what's going to happen the way record labels promote things these days. So
she also has half a Christmas album. I guess it's an EP out. And I was kind of wondering if she was going to do maybe 5 more songs and have a full-length Christmas album. But I feel like if she would do that now, like her vocal quality is a little different than it was on that. So it would sound a little uneven. But
remember the days of special Japan-only bonus tracks on CDs?
Right.
I have a few of those. I think I have a Diane Reeves with a Japan-only bonus track.
One thing that kind of bugs me about that is, back in, say, the 90s, the 80s when they were doing this, We had no idea there were these extra tracks that were only in Japan.
Yeah.
So listening to this album, who knew? There are these secret tracks somewhere by your favorite artist and you can't hear them. Of course, now you can, though, with the internet.
Anyway, we got a special episode coming up next week. Before I get to that, thanks as always to Fast Signs of Staten Island for our glowing neon logo. And next week, we're going to have our guest host, Jason Kaiser, return. He's been on once before. That was interesting. And he's got his new album coming out this Friday on OA2, Kind of Kenny, featuring the compositions of trumpeter Kenny Wheeler and a couple of Jason's originals as well. We hope that John Stowell, guitarist, will join in on the conversation. We think he's in Europe, so if we can get all that tied together from 4 different locations, it should come off pretty interestingly.
Should be exciting.
But we're not going to let Jason get away with just talking about his own album. No, of course not.
Of course
We've
not.
given him some homework to do as well. And so what have you got him listening to in classical, Mike?
The last time we had him listen to all guitar music, so I thought, why don't we just get away from that? So I gave him one of our favorite pianists, Daniil Trifonov's new album of American classical compositions from Gershwin. A lot of them are jazzy,
Right.
but there's some other things on there too. I thought we just hit him with some American compositions and see how he reacts to those.
Right.
And to some great piano playing too
Yeah.
from Trifonov.
I've got one more album to pair up with his, so we're only doing 3 next week, as you mentioned. And this is a German saxophonist, Thomas Hanling's 3-in-1. Now, why I picked this album, on Jason's recording, the instrumentation is really interesting. We've got 2 guitars, trumpet, sax, and vocals. No bass and no drums. Now, recently we've heard a lot of cordless groups, cordless trios especially, or even a quartet with 2 horns. It's very rare that we hear something without bass. So this album has no bass and his album has no drums. So since this has sax and guitar along with drums, I thought it might be interesting to talk about how guitar works in and what needs to be done differently when there's no bass on a recording. And some of the compositions are pretty interesting on Thomas Hanling's recordings. So that should be an interesting thing to combine with Jason's recording as well. Anyway, if you want to check out those recordings, we'll have them in a playlist. They'll be up on Deezer shortly after this episode is published, excepting Jason's album, which won't come out until Friday, but I'll add that once it's released. And you can also find a link to that from our Facebook page. Any final words for this masquerading Halloween episode, Mike?
I think I will wear my usual costume as a music nerd this Halloween and go as myself.
All right. Trick-or-treating?
Well, just treats for me.
Just
thanks.
treats for yourself, yeah. It's usually the best way to do it.
They're all in the form of CDs.
All right, then, that's going to wrap things up for episode 186 here at Adult Music. Next week, 187 with guests Jason Kaiser and hopefully John Stowell as well. That'll be interesting. So until next time, keep listening, and we'll see you again for episode 187.